Race mixing was illegal up until 2002. You're going to give up 50,000 years of evolution if you mix up with this dude.
Are you filming us?
Yes.
This video isn't about telling anyone who they should date or marry. It's about a specific reaction that keeps showing up from white men when white women decide to marry or date black men. The anger alone isn't the point. It's the language that comes with it. Words like contaminated, ruined, single mother, keep the bloodline clean, you know, things that you've heard before. That language doesn't come from nowhere, and it tells you exactly why this reaction happens. One of the easiest ways that people try to shut this conversation down is by calling it a preference. They'll say everyone has preferences, everybody's allowed to like who they like, and that should be the end of it. But preference does not explain what we're seeing. Preference doesn't come with rage. Preference doesn't come with slurs. Preference doesn't involve talking about bloodlines or contamination. And preference doesn't look like obsessing over strangers' activity.
I've come for your pickle.
You're making this comment because I have a boyfriend of a different race. This is what you're willing to die on the hill for. A random stranger on the internet. They say love thy neighbor as thyself, and if this were me, I would say get a job, a hobby, at least.
There are a lot of interracial relationships, especially involving black men, that are surrounded by fetishization. A lot of the time, black men aren't treated as human beings. We're treated like a fantasy or a sex object instead of regular people. I've already made a video breaking down fetishization, so I'm not gonna go too deep into that here because that's not the focus of this video. But at the same time, there are also plenty of interracial relationships where black men are shown genuine love and are treated like the human beings that we are. So when people go out of their way to harass this girl, mock her, and call her things like mud shark, that's wrong, bro. Especially when you don't know the ins and outs of their relationship. When a white man gets angry about a white woman dating or marrying a black man, that reaction isn't about who he wants to date. It's about who he thinks she's supposed to be with. And that difference matters. That reaction isn't quiet, it isn't passive, and it isn't personal taste. It's enforcement. It's the feeling that something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. And once you see that, it's clear that this isn't about romance at all. It's about control. To understand this reaction, you have to look at how some white men think about this world and their place in it. A lot of white men were raised in environments where whiteness stayed together by default. They grew up seeing white families, white neighborhoods, white social circles, white expectations. Nobody ever had to say it out loud, it just felt normal. And over time, that turns into an unspoken belief that certain lines are not meant to be crossed. Not because anyone sat down and thought it through, but because that's how it's always looked for them. In that mindset, white women aren't always seen as fully separate individuals making their own independent choices. They're seen as part of the group, something that's expected to stay within those same lines and barriers. So when a white woman chooses a black man, the reaction isn't, "That's not my preference." They read it as her stepping out of line. And that's why the anger shows up. Because control is being challenged, not over the woman as a person, but over the boundary itself. The idea that whiteness stays contained, familiar, and unchanged. And when that idea falls apart, some white men feel like something's being taken from them, even though nothing belonged to them in the first place. This is where the language people use exposes everything. When white men say a white woman is contaminated or ruined by being with a black man, they're not talking about love, compatibility, or values. They're talking about worth. And that language only makes sense if you believe that blackness lowers value, that it stains, that it permanently changes someone in a negative way. And that belief doesn't come from dating culture. It comes from racial hierarchy. You don't talk about human beings like objects unless you already see race as something that can be spoiled or tainted. And you don't frame black men as contamination unless you've already convinced yourself that blackness is something that's bad. Even when people try to laugh it off later or claim that they didn't mean it literally, we already know the truth.
Yes, all the time. I think I'm contaminated.
Contaminated?
Yeah,
Why do you guys say that? Wait, what happened?
because I've been with black guys, so like they just think I'm contaminated.
And how do you feel? Do you think they're insecure?
Yeah, they get very insecure because they know that like they obviously have like you know? Don't.
What the hell? Have you ever been with insecure white guys that got insecure with you dating black guys?
Yeah, they get insecure sometimes because black guys, like, their size is usually bigger and they're just, like, overall better. Their hair, everything.
And what do you have to say to those white guys?
What I have to say is get bigger, get more confident, and you want us to compete with me.
Do you think race mixing should be illegal?
Should it be legal or illegal?
Illegal.
Oh, no. No.
Why not?
I love my chocolate man.
So you're a mud shark.
Oh, what?
You're a mud shark?
A mud shark is crazy. No.
You said you like chocolate men.
Okay.
So you're a mud shark. Why should race mixing be legal if the child is more likely to turn out?
That's a statistic.
Yes.
From what source?
Me looking around.
Those words come out easily because the idea is already there. This is not accidental language. It's inherited thinking. To them, there's no room for change, no room for context, and it's no room for individual differences. Once somebody's labeled ruined, that's it. And that kind of thinking only works when people stop seeing others as individuals and start seeing them as symbols that either hold or lose value. And that's why this language shows up so consistently. It's not about the specific relationship. It's about reinforcing an old belief that crossing racial lines should come with some sort of consequences behind it. Saying someone is contaminated isn't about describing reality. It's about warning others what would happen if you step outside of the boundary that they have in their head. Another part of this reaction that barely gets talked about honestly is fear. Not fear of danger, but fear of comparison. For a long time, black men were kept out of certain social competition. And it wasn't subtle. It was enforced through law, violence, and stigma, especially when it came to proximity to whiteness. But when those barriers weaken, comparison becomes unavoidable. And you gotta understand, comparison is uncomfortable for people that were never taught to deal with it, especially when their identity was built around being the default option instead of one option among many. So instead of processing that discomfort internally, it gets redirected towards us because anger feels easier than insecurity and blame feels easier than adjustment. That's why this reaction usually comes from white men that don't know the woman, they don't know the man, and would never be affected by the relationship in any real way. The reaction isn't about them personally. It's about what the situation represents. It represents a world where assumptions don't guarantee outcomes anymore. What makes this even harder for some people to deal with is that comparison forces self-reflection. It raises questions they were never encouraged to ask, like whether status was earned or assumed, and whether confidence was built on ability or just never being challenged in the first place. For people who were taught to see themselves as the standard, being compared at all can feel like disrespect instead of something normal. And instead of sitting with that discomfort and adjusting to it, some white men try to shut down a comparison entirely. They attack the relationship, the people in it, or the idea of it existing at all. Not because it directly harms them, but because it reminds them that the world doesn't revolve around the same guarantees anymore. One of the most common things that you'll hear is this idea that if a white woman dates or marries a black man, she'll end up a single mother. What matters isn't whether or not single motherhood exists. It's how selectively that argument gets used. White men leave families. White men create unstable homes, and white men fail as partners and fathers every single day. But nobody turns that into a racial warning. The single motherhood talk only comes out when the man is black.
I don't care if they date black.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world, I think. I mean, like, you definitely got to vet them out and shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, it might not be like, you don't want her to be a single mom and shit, but...
Hold up. Did you say compete? No. They can have you. We're good. As a member of the white delegation, I hereby sentence you to single motherhood.
Would you guys rather have a mud shark daughter or a wigger son? A mud shark daughter or a wigger son? So your son, a wigger son, is like a son that wears like Jordan 11, sags his pants.
No,
dresses
I don't
like
want one of him.
Yeah.
What's the other one, though?
Mud shark daughter, she only dates black guys.
No.
Which one?
No, I'll before both.
So this isn't about concern. It's about discouragement. It's meant to scare her, shame her, and send a clear message. Step outside of these lines and there will be consequences. That's not advice. That's control pretending to be concerned. There's no room for individual behavior, no room for responsibility, and no room for real outcomes. The conclusion is already decided before anything even happens. And that kind of thinking doesn't come from real experience or facts. It comes from a story that people were taught and never question. If you say it enough times, it starts to sound like common sense to the people that are repeating it. They stop hearing it as an insult or a threat, and they start hearing it as truth. But when you step back and look how selectively it's applied, it's clear this narrative isn't about protecting anyone. It's about reinforcing boundaries and discouraging choices that challenge the racial order that they're trying to hold on to. When people start talking about bloodlines, that's when the mask really comes off. That language comes straight from racial purity thinking. The idea that whiteness is fragile and has to be protected. That mixing means loss and that change is a threat. And that way of thinking treats race like something you own, not something you are. It treats having kids like an obligation, not a choice. And that's why the reaction hits hardest when white women are involved. In that mindset, they're seen as carrying whiteness forward. So their relationships aren't treated as personal. They're treated as group decisions. So when a white woman chooses a black man, some white men feel like something was stolen, like something got tainted, as if something was taken from them. And it's not because of love, but it's because of control over the future. The internet didn't invent these ideas. It just gave them a mic. Social media platforms let resentment bounce around, get validated, and get louder. People feed off of each other's fears and tell themselves that they're protecting culture, when really they're just exposing their own insecurity. Stuff that would sound wild in real life starts to sound normal in those spaces. And because it gets dressed up as tradition or concern, people don't ever really own up to what it is that they're saying. What used to get whispered amongst themselves is now getting said out loud. This video is not about telling people what to do with their lives, and it's not about me trying to defend white women. It is not my personal stance on interracial dating. Personally, I date black women, but I don't get upset or angry with black people that date outside of their race. It has nothing to do with me, and my opinion on somebody else's relationship does not matter. All I'm doing is telling you why certain people respond with rage and obsession when a line they thought was set in stone gets crossed. And that reaction shows beliefs about ranking, ownership, and control never went away. They just stayed hidden until moments like this poured them out. And until people are honest about that, they'll keep pretending this behavior is harmless, just a preference, or normal behavior. It's not.